The NBA draft is almost here, so we'll be focusing on some of the top defenders in the draft. Is it an area of need for Miami? Can the Heat find a player that keeps them as a top 10 NBA defense? We'll break down the best options available in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. For daily content on the Heat, click that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you are following us on your favorite podcast app. Had a ton of content about the latest on Kevin Durant go up this week, so if you missed any of that, make sure to check out your podcast feed. Check out the YouTube channel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. Big show today. It's another installment of our Blue Notebook series, scouting prospects for the NBA draft. Today, we are looking at some of my favorite kind of prospects, David. I tend to like the defensive guys. The one-way guys, but the guys who prefer the defensive side of the ball. We're going to talk about Colin Murray-Boyles, Carter Bryant, Thomas Sorber, and Noah Penda. We're going to get into their pros and cons, get some player comps, and at the end, we're going to tell you who we like most for the Heat. It is another Blue Notebook.
That's what I'm doing. I'm taking 10 blue notebooks with me to Malibu with my wife. Blue notebooks. Blue notebooks. Blue notebooks. 10 blue notebooks to Malibu. Blue notebooks. Blue notebooks. Blue notebooks. 10 blue notebooks to Malibu.
My life.
Shout out to Brian Wilson, man. Legend. I don't know. He said Malibu, and it got me thinking. Are you a Beach Boys guy?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Pet Sounds, I think,
convincing.
is pretty...
Pet Sounds.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say I skew heavily towards Beach Boys consumption, but no, I mean, it's hard not to appreciate what they did.
Feels like we hear them all the time here in Florida. So we each scouted two of these four prospects. You did the homework on Carter Bryant and Thomas Sorber. Where do you want to start?
Let's start off with Carter Bryant, because I think that's a name that a lot of people are excited about, and he's definitely somebody who's rising up a lot of big boards, because this was a player who was slated to be around Miami's 20th pick in the upcoming draft, and now it doesn't look like he's going to go beyond the top 10. He could slip, I suppose. That's always the tantalizing aspect of draft night, is that you never know what's going to happen, but the potential is so obvious, and this physical tools are so clearly available to him, that he is just somebody that I think a lot of scouts are seeing more and more of, and thinking, well, he could be a long-time NBA player. So we'll start off there. He's a wingman from Arizona, 6'7", more or less. I've seen him at 6'8", 6'6", whatever. So let's say 6'7", about 215, with a 7-foot wingspan. So again, physical tools are all there. Just 19 years old. So that's another part. 1 year there, not a lot of experience, just 19 minutes a game for the Wildcats, but he showed enough promise there. 6.5 points per game, 4.1 rebounds. Solid production for that limited playing time. The shooting splits were pretty decent, 46% from the field, 37% from three-point range. My concern, the 70%, 69.5% exactly from free throw range. So that's not great, but in terms of what you like, it's just the prototype, I think, for a 3-and-D player. He's got the size, he's got the wingspan. He is definitely what you look for in terms of a wing player in today's game. He has all that. He's not explosive, but he's certainly athletic, and it's so clear that he's just a better athlete than almost anybody else on the floor. You wonder whether or not that's going to translate to the NBA level, when there are, obviously, the baseline for athleticism is much higher than it is in the college game. But as terms of what he was able to do collegiately, he definitely stands out there. Great defensive instincts, really incredible timing. We had one of the best in Miami and Jimmy Butler, and being able to anticipate passing lanes. Bryant does it as well, in my opinion. Again, subpar passing maybe at the collegiate level, but in terms of being able to read where the pass is going and being able to make that quick decision, I don't think anybody in college basketball was better at it than Bryant last year. He just has a real knack for being able to pick the ball free and ignite a transition opportunity. You know, that's how Miami's offense has basically been built over the last 5 seasons. it's going to be a continued factor. I would say Bryant could certainly add to that. Great passer, more of a connector than anything else, not necessarily the guy who's going to be initiating a play or anything like that, but in terms of being that guy who can be a secondary hub, he certainly has the good instincts. He finds the right cutter. He knows where the play is going to develop, and he seems to find a way to, just keep that ball moving in a way that leads to an easy basket. So I think there's potential for him to be more of a pick and roll player as a ball handler. And I think it basically boils down to, when in terms of how people are looking at him, the physical tools are just so obvious and so impressive that's why he started off in a lot of draft boards as kind of a 21st, 22nd selection. I've seen him as high as 8. So people are clearly seeing what he has as potential. And I think he stood out a lot in any kind of combine or work that he's done. And it's really helped his draft stock over the last couple of weeks. So he might not even be an option for Miami, with teams like Oklahoma City and Orlando that love those kind of long wing defenders with kind of upside. He certainly fits the bill for that. So he might not be an option for Miami.
I've seen him mocked to Houston if they end up keeping that pick, because he's kind of also the Tari Eason player mold type, right? The guys that they tend to like. I've seen him, to your point. ESPN has him at 12. I think the Ringer has him in their lottery area. But Rafael Barlow, who runs the NBA Big Board show for us, he has him at 17. And talking with Rafael, he's not as high on Bryant as some of these other places are, just because the on-ball stuff with him just wasn't really there. He wasn't high usage in his 2 years in college, and it wasn't like and what he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially it's like, if I'm taking a guy that high, I kind of want there to be more. I want him to have popped more offensively at the college level. Like, the defense and stuff is all great, but we're talking about a lottery pick here, and he has him more as like a middle of the first round guy. He has him at 17. Again, Miami doesn't pick until 20, so even if he goes there, if he can go out of the lottery and still not fall to Miami. But what do you think? Like, do you think this is a lottery guy?
I could say path was Kelly Oubre Jr. And was he of good value as a lottery pick? I think that's hard to evaluate, but he's been a long-time NBA veteran who's contributed to every team he's played for. So is he a star? Probably not. But people who fit that kind of description are so rare. Like, you can convince yourself that almost anybody in the draft could wind up being a star. It's not going to happen. It's going to happen one out of every 20-something players.
So you'd like to see something at the college level. And he just didn't. Offensively, there's just nothing there.
The thing that I came up with, and I think one of the biggest knocks there, is what they're calling the motor. Like, he just doesn't seem overtly passionate. It's almost like, ho-hum, I'm that good, I can just get this done, and I don't need to really show or be demonstrative or anything like that. But it reminds me a lot of a story of a friend of mine who's a teacher, and the kind of students that they love best, teachers almost by and large agree that the students that they love best are not your straight A students. It's the guys that really struggle and fight and get that C, but damn, they worked really hard for that C. He's not that guy. Bryant is not that guy. Bryant is a guy who falls ass backwards into an A just because he has so much dominance physically that he can just get it done. Like, it was so clear watching the film on him. He's just like, oh yeah, I just have to put a hand out there. And with that 7-foot wingspan, it's going to be a steal. I'm stronger than you are. I'm just quick enough to get past you. I don't need to show it or be demonstrative. And I think that really makes a difference. So it just looks like a lack of motor. Heck, you could have said the same thing last year for Kel'el Ware. So I think that's just part of it, is that there are just some people who have those kind of physical skills that are so much clearly better than everybody else at that level that they don't show the kind of motor. They're not diving to the floor like Davion Mitchell. They're not scrapping for every play. And then conversely, offensively, he just doesn't feel the need to get it done. That's why he was more of a passer, et cetera. So I don't know. I reason why a lot of people think and I could also see him dropping to about the 15 to 20 range.
Let's go quick. Player comps and Buster Muscale.
Timani Kamara, I think, is one that really stood out there. Kelly Oubre, I mentioned. I think on a high end, if he winds up getting there. Paul George,
Ooh, okay, I like that.
Yeah. Again, a guy who can really have two-way potential. The shooting form is fine. I don't think it was great necessarily. And again, the free throw shooting percentage is not great, but I think he shot well. I think most people want to see whether or not the high shooting percentage from 3-point range is a mirage or something consistently. But I think if he puts in the work, and again, it's hard to tell how motivated they are at the NBA level. If he puts in that work, I think he'd be a really great player. And conversely, I have him as a 10% chance of becoming an all-star, which is probably the highest I've given out just yet.
It is
75% as a rotation player, just because he's
Yep.
gonna stick around. You cannot be that talented, that physical, and not have a place in the NBA. And then 15% fringe, just in case he just really says, you know what, I don't really care about playing basketball, which does happen. So
this is one of the highest you've been, it sounds like, on a player that we've scouted in our Blue Notebooks so far.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I think that he's climbing for a lot of reasons, and I kind of have him now as probably at the top of my board.
So I did the homework on Colin Murray-Boyles, who's very similar to Carter Bryant in that wide range, depending on who you ask. Definitely like a top 10 guy. Some people think he's more of a middle, maybe even the end of the first round. We'll get into Colin Murray-Boyles on the other side of this here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Olipop. Olipop is a new kind of soda made for people who love the classic taste of soda but want something that supports their health, with just 2 to 5 grams of sugar per can and 9 grams of probiotic fiber in every can. Olipop is reimagining soda in a way that's better for your gut. Traditional sodas are loaded with sugar. Everybody knows this, like 39 grams in a regular Coke or 44 grams in an orange Fanta. Olipop flips that script with just a fraction of the sugar, no artificial sweeteners, and gut-friendly ingredients like OliSmart, a blend shown to support digestive and overall health. It's soda that tastes like the real thing, but actually does something good for you. We love the taste of Olipop here at the house. My son, at 6 years old, is a huge fan of the crisp apple. There's so many flavors to choose from. You'll love them. I prefer the vintage cola. That's just me. But you can go cherry cola, classic grape, or maybe Dr. Goodwin, their Dr. Pepper dupe. There are lots of options to choose from. I'm sure you'll find yours. And right now, you can get a free can of Olipop. If you just buy any 2 cans in the store, they'll give you a third one, reimburse you for one. Head to drinkolipop.com/LockedOnNBA. That's drinkolipop.com/LockedOnNBA to claim your free can and find Olipop near you. That's drinkolipop.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back.
All right, so the next prospect we're going to talk about here, Colin Murray-Boyles, 6'7", with a 7-foot wingspan, 245 pounds, 19 years old, averaged 17 points, 8.3 rebounds, 2.4 assists, 1.5 steals, and 1.3 blocks last year at South Carolina. Very similar to Carter Bryant, very different to Carter Bryant. Similar in that both of these guys defensive leaning, right? That's the theme of the episode. Similar in that there's question marks offensively, not a ton of usage there. It's like, okay, what can he really do? Was he just not used a lot? Or was there a reason he wasn't used a lot? And that's going to be up to, these teams to figure out in their private workouts and their due diligence. But here's what I do like about him. Super disruptive on defense. Yeah. Anticipates actions, creates steals and blocks, has a really high steal and block ratio. And the instincts there, the anticipation, the basketball IQ, it all pops. But he combines it with that physical profile. Again, the 6'7" height with the 7-foot wingspan and a big body at 245 pounds. He could guard 1 through 5 potentially. Yep. I think he's not going to be able to stay in front of like the quickest point guards in the NBA, but nobody can, right? Generally speaking, he's going to be able to switch. He was used to trap ball handlers quite a bit at South Carolina. There was a game where they were playing Oklahoma and Jeremiah Fears, and he went out and contained Jeremiah Fears on the perimeter multiple times. And that was one of those aha moments for scouts where they're like, oh, wow. Because Fears is a lottery pick. That guy's being talked about like a top 10 guy. So for him to do that, people are like, whoa, that's a pretty big deal. The strength and length stands out when you watch him on film. High defensive rebound percentage. High defensive rebound rate, which you like. Good at boxing out, good at going up and grabbing them. So good at containing the ball, super versatile, good at ending possessions. Just plus, check, every box defensively. He's doing it all. Offensively, I like some of the potential I saw there. Good with the slot cuts, very timely. Finishes with dunks, which I like in traffic. He was used in post-ups quite a bit, which you never really know how that's going to translate to the NBA level. That's very sort of team-oriented. Like how many post-ups is this team generally running? And they're not usually going to run them for rookies anyway. But He scored over 1 point per possession on post-ups at South Carolina. It's hard to know whether that his footwork doesn't really stand out. It kind of feels like really big, strong guy bullying smaller college guys. How does that hold up at the NBA level? But interesting enough to include it here. I think he's got a pretty good handle and body control, despite the fact that he's not a super on-ball guy. And I really like his decision making in the short roll. They ran him a lot in pick and roll as the roll man.
Yeah.
And when the guard would find him, he was just really good at just finding that guy in the weak side corner, or, the corner 3-point shooter, and maybe some guy on the baseline for the dump off pass. Just a good short roll decision maker, simple passes, does what he's asked to do there. Go ahead.
Where does he project, like, positionally? Because he seems like he was utilized more as kind of a pseudo big there, but in terms of like his physical profile, he's got the bulk, he's also got the speed. Is he just a big wing? Is he kind of like a Siakam type? Yeah. Okay.
I think he's a 4. I don't know that you want to play him at the 3 because getting into my cons here, he's not a floor spacer. Shot 26.5% on 1.1 3-point attempts per game. So low percentage on low volume. That's a tough look, right? Now you watch the film. The mechanics aren't broken, right? Like, I think they're okay.
Clunky.
He did shoot 70% on free throws, which isn't terrible. So I think the question is, okay, obviously he's not shooting it at a high rate now, but can he? With a few more years, can he improve? And again, he's 19 years old, so he's still on the young side in the draft. So if you think he can improve, then maybe you're not as concerned about the low volume, low rate from deep. But still, like, if you're trying to get him on the floor, defenses are going to play off of him. He looks like that guy that's going to have that reputation, if you know what I mean. 6'7", 7-foot wingspan, 245, defensive leaning. Like, even Lou Dort, who shoots like 40% from 3, defenses still just leave him open.
Right.
Because you just earn that reputation, despite what your percentage is after a while. And he kind of just feels like that, where defenses are just going to leave him open. Kind of like a PJ Tucker, right? Every 3 PJ Tucker took was wide open because defenses didn't close out on him. And he hit him on a night at a high rate, but you would never call PJ Tucker a floor spacer because he didn't space the floor. He just made open threes. So I kind of feel like that's where his career trajectory is going to go, unless he kind of pops onto the scene really early, which, again, no reason to expect that to happen from 3-point range. Also not an explosive athlete. He does not finish above the rim, which is a little disappointing considering the physical profile. He relies a lot on strength. Who did I call a Roomba? Danny Wolf. Did I say he moves like a Roomba? Colin Murray-Boyles is a lot like that too. Kind of moves like a Roomba, low to the ground. Relies a lot on his strength advantage in college, which obviously could be neutralized in the NBA. The guy's strong. Like, he's going to be stronger than some NBA players. Don't get me wrong, but not stronger than over as many NBA players as he was in college. So,
sure.
The obvious comp people are going to want to make with this guy is Draymond Green. I'm not going to do that. I don't make Draymond Green comparisons because there's only one Draymond. He kind of feels like a Jeremy Sohan to me.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. Really? Sohan? I mean, Sohan's more like a smaller wing type player, though. I mean,
Sohan, they play him at the 4 and the 5 in San Antonio.
I guess you're right. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like
playmaking chops, good defensively, not overtly athletic.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of a wide base there in terms of what he can do, but doesn't really excel necessarily in anything enough to really make him into a long-term prospect.
Yeah, I think if you're lucky, he develops into like a Jalen Johnson type.
Ooh.
But there's equal amounts of like Rondae Hollis-Jefferson in there.
There you go.
You know what I mean?
Valentine. Yeah, sure.
These are the kinds of guys that I think are the hardest players to scout. Like, literally 6'7", big NBA body already, 7-foot wingspan, does a bunch of things. And this is kind of my problem with the NBA. 20 years ago, this guy would have had a place in the league, no question.
Sure.
And now if you can't shoot threes, you're not allowed to play in the NBA. Like, the NBA has just become like the league of 3-point shooting. And it kind of bothers me because I enjoy watching this guy so much. But in terms of the bust or must scale, I've got 30% fringe because you just never know if that 3-point shot doesn't go. He goes the way of the Rondae Hollis-Jefferson dinosaurs. 50% role player, 15% high-end rotation. I'm going to go 5% all-star just because if he does hit that that Jalen Johnson type level, that's what I would qualify in terms of like that all-star caliber player. And I do think there's a room. I think he's got really good feel, and so I'm leaving that percentage there. But this guy feels like a good role player you would want to have on your roster, who you can put in there for your hands team, put in there for your defensive lineups, and you feel pretty good about it. Like a Sohan, right? Sohan's not going to be a star. He's not essential to the Spurs, but they like having him. And that kind of feels like what Collin Murray-Boyles is going to be. And if he's there at 20, that's not a bad player to have at 20.
It just feels like that's what Miami's kind of depth is based on, is just guys. And you know, you never want to necessarily disparage what they could do because they're all great in their own ways, but they just don't really stand out and pop. It's like maybe he's the right option for a team that's built differently than Miami. I think that they need somebody who has more of a swing factor, more of the upside potential. It just doesn't sound like he has that.
Right. That's sort of the central thing is depth is good, as we've seen in these finals. Like maybe, yes, Miami has some guys. They kind of need more guys. So if they feel like they need more guys, go get another guy. But if they want to take a big swing, I don't think Collin Murray-Boyles is that big swing. And I'm not even sure he's going to be there at 20, just like your guy might not be there at 20. But we're going to talk about two guys who are projected, at least by Rafael Barlow, to be there at 20, at least according to his big board. Well, we're going to talk about Thomas Sorber, the center out of Georgetown. We're going to talk about Noah Penda, who I'm really intrigued by, after the break.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA Finals are in full swing. Every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments, whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player. There's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. If you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a you're new to FanDuel? This is the perfect time to sign up. Go to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. That's right, $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We'll be right back.
Two prospects, one segment. We got to be quick with them. You did the homework on
Thomas Sorber.
Thomas Sorber. Tell me about him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Thomas Sorber, about out of Georgetown, 6'10", 255, 7.5-foot wingspan. So definitely a big body. His
how much?
Was 7.5 wingspan. 6'10".
I don't think that's right. I think he's got a 7'6" wingspan.
Yeah, isn't that 7.5 foot?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it meant like a half inch. Yeah, 7'6" wingspan.
Yeah.
I don't know if people say it that way.
7.5 foot, right?
7'6" wingspan. I just want to emphasize 7'6" wingspan. This guy has an enormous wingspan.
Okay.
Can't just gloss
also
over
19. That. Yeah. No. Yeah. 19 years old. His year was cut short by injury. He was playing really well. I had a lot of people thinking he was a great prospect, and then unfortunately his year got cut short. But I think he showed enough during that year where he really stood out and his name kind of stuck around. 24 games, played 31 minutes or just over 31 minutes a game, 14.5 points per game, 8.5 rebounds per game, 2.5 assists per game, shot 53.2% from field goal range overall, 2 blocks per game. I forget to mention that. Shot well from the line. It's 73% basically. So I think the shooting splits are okay. The three-point range isn't there, but that's something we'll talk about a little bit later. He's more of an old type prospect to me. He's got a great interior presence, not necessarily polished in terms of his back to the basket game, but he just, again, overpowers people, knows how to use his body well, can create opportunities for himself that way, both offensively and defensively. Again, a lot of the same things it's what we were talking about with a lot of these prospects is that just by nature of being what they are physically, they can get away with a lot of stuff that might not necessarily translate to the NBA. At the NBA level, to be a smart defender or a quality defender, you've got to be able to do more than just kind of outplay everybody or just kind of put a hand up there. You've got to be able to outsmart and outthink what they're going to do. It's a lot of film work, a lot of the physical tools. But, I mean, I don't know that Sorber has that. He's just so tall and so long because of his reach that he can block a lot of shots and reach up and, again, disrupt a lot of passing. So there's a great defensive presence there that I'm not necessarily sure is going to translate into a great overall defender. Sets good screens, does all the good work, rolls to the basket well, good in DHOs. So there's a lot to like there. And he's a good passer and playmaker for his size. So I think there's definitely the possibility of using him as another connector on offense to create some opportunities for other players as well. So there are some really nice skills there. And I think it's going to be, to me, it's a huge question about how he gets the opportunity to continue to develop those. And I don't know that Miami is necessarily the right team for him. What I don't like is the mobility defensively. He's not necessarily the guy that you're going to put out there on an island. He can't switch. So that being the case, is he going to be exploited defensively? Can you run just a lot of drop with him? Is that the kind of defense that Miami wants to incorporate with a guy like that? I don't think so. He seems even less mobile to me than Ware does. And already we've seen with Ware necessarily not going to be a guy. He's had some nice possessions, but I don't know, unless he continues to improve in that regard, that could be a weak spot moving forward. And it could be for Sorber as well. And he can't really shoot. The mechanics are fine. He's got the midi down pat. I think it could extend a little bit. And I think he's going to eventually be a quality three-point shooter just because I see the form and I see the mechanics. And I think the possibility is there for him to reach that. And that kind of leads me to my player comp, Al Horford.
Oh.
And that's a really good player. That's a great comp. I think in terms
does he
of
have the three ball like that?
He does not. But and I did some quick math here. Do you know how many 3-point attempts Al Horford took during his first 7 NBA seasons?
Is that rhetorical? I have no idea. 20?
39.
Okay.
39 in 7 NBA seasons. And collegiately, he took 2.
Okay.
So this is not somebody who projects as a 3-point shooter right now, but like Horford eventually can develop that. And maybe that's a huge question mark. But if you're talking about what he already brings to the
42% on his free throw attempts. So there's some shooting touch there. I don't hate it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I could see him eventually extending that range and continuing to develop that. And just because that's the way the league is trending, he had more shot attempts than Horford did collegiately, so maybe there's a point of concern there. But I like the mechanics. I think it's something he can work on. He just wasn't really called on to do so at Georgetown, and you wonder whether or not at a different school maybe that would have been something that would have been developed a little bit more. But again, not really much experience either with only a 30 game played. So
yeah. So talking to Rafael Barlow about him too, he was a little surprised that this guy was a one and done.
Yeah,
right? And he played.
Yeah,
he said he played well, but it felt like he could have gone back. The comp I saw with him a lot was Kevon Looney, and that might have been focusing mostly on what he does defensively, which I see. Did you have the Buster Muscale with him?
Yeah, I've got 70% rotation player. I've got 15% all-star, 15% fringe.
15% all-star, future all-star, like in 6 or 7 years, maybe kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a guy who could develop. He was a long-time mainstay there. I could see him kind of being that player who just like Horford. Maybe he doesn't really pop or stand out, but every team wants a guy like that at his size and his ability, and I think he could have a long NBA career.
Wendell Carter Jr. maybe?
Yeah, I saw that. I saw Greg Monroe, although that felt a little bit too easy just because of the Georgetown comp.
Yeah.
I saw Ben Baker too. Good back to the basket player who could do some stuff around, finishes well in traffic. Not again, you've got the size, you've got the length. He uses his physical tools well. That bodes for a long career. It's like, you know what? I might not be an above the rim player, but I'm going to get the work done to continue to put up numbers and help the team chance to win.
I like him. I did some work on him too. You're right about the lack of. He's not going to be a switch defender. That's okay. I think he can get up to the level. I think he's got the wingspan. Uses that wingspan to block shots, get his hand in passing lanes. I actually think he could be really effective defensively, especially when you think about like a Jokic type defensively, where they get up to that level and then use their long arms to just knock balls away on that first pass. It feels like he could definitely do that and be pretty disruptive defensively, despite the fact that he doesn't have, the mobility that you would typically associate with a disruptive defender. So I like him. He might be a career backup. To your point, maybe one of these swing skills pops and then he emerges as a long-term starter, potentially even an all-star. But again, at 20, that's fine. I had Noah Penda. So this is a really intriguing prospect here. So let me just get into some of the basics here. 20 years old, 6'7" with a 6'11" wingspan, 242 pounds. And he's actually added 20 pounds based on some of my research here, like over the last year. That's a little interesting. We'll get to that in a second here. But he averaged 10 points. He played in the French Professional League, averaged 10 points a game, 44% shooting overall, 30% on 3.2 3-point attempts per game. Got to the free throw line a little bit, shot 70% there, 5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.4 steals, and half a block in about 27 minutes per game. So that's the focus of this. He led the French league in combined steals and blocks per game. And that pops when you watch him. It's like the thing that pops right away. It's like, oh, this guy is just taking the ball. I think he's super fast to download and react defensively. His off-ball defense is straight up beautiful. Like he's active, he's reactive, he's got good vision, he's watching, he doesn't get caught falling asleep watching the ball. High activity level, thrived in a switching scheme on his French team, just would envelope smaller ball handlers all the time, and he would stand up guys in that post in the post with his size. Multiple efforts, does a good job of chasing and defending from behind. You know, when he does eventually get screened off, because no matter everybody's gonna get screened off eventually. When he does get screened off, really good at getting over that screen and getting back into the play. So that those multiple efforts, that activity level, all of this stuff really pops. Offensively, he was used as a point forward at times, also in the post as sort of a facilitator when they would run split cuts and stuff like that. He's got, as that point forward, good instincts for getting into the middle and then passing out, right? He likes to get middle, likes to get 2 feet in the paint and then find open shooters. And he had flashes of like real creativity as a passer that is really interesting to me. He could pass with either hand. He passed from like a lot of different angles. He was mostly making the simple read, obviously. But every once in a while, he would be like, he would do something, and you were like, "Whoa, where did that pass come from?" It looked like he's got a couple like Luka Doncic type behind the back type passes. You're like, where did that come from? Offensively, I also like that he's a really quick decision maker. David, you know this is a big thing for me. 0.5ing,
Yep.
Dribble, pass, or shoot in half a second, make the decision and do it. He does that, at least in the French National League. So a lot of things to like there. The cons. It's kind of the same thing we've been talking about this whole episode. The swing skills, the outside jumper. It's 30% overall. What I do like is he wasn't shy. He did take over 3 3-point attempts per game. So doesn't shy away from taking them. He's trying to do it. The free throw percentage, you'd like it to be a little bit higher. But I prefer a player who's not afraid to take that shot. That means that there's confidence. It also means that behind the scenes, they're putting the work in, right? You only get that confidence by putting that work in. So I like what that says to me. So I think that outside jumper is actually going to hit for him eventually. I'm not as worried about it. The mechanics look fine. They're not perfect. I think they could be worked on, but they're not broken. Needs to do a better job navigating screens. I think that could be taught. Gets a little over aggressive defensively at times. Can end up out of position. Like I said, has the speed and the length to get back into the play for those chase downs, for those behind the play defensive plays. But at the NBA level, you'd rather just be in position in the first place. Again, I think that's something that could be taught. He just gets a little too over aggressive. Sometimes we'll just wall up a guy setting on defense, wall up a guy, try to run through the guy setting the screen. And you're like, dude, chill out for a sec. But I think if you can contain that aggressiveness, you have something there. Offensively, again, loose handle, prone to getting stripped. When they did use him in post-ups, sometimes he would dribble it a little too high and guys would just take it away on drives. It gets a little bit too high of a dribble. Needs to tighten up that handle. I wonder if at the NBA level he's more of like a 1 or 2 dribble max guy, which would be my worry if that handle doesn't improve. And the athleticism isn't totally there. Mostly a below the rim finisher. Doesn't have a ton of creation skills. A lot of his layups end up like tough or contested or blocked at the rim or and stuff like that, which you don't want him to have to rely on push shots and floaters and things like that. If he ends up just sort of being a corner 3 guy, that's a little tough offensively. You know what I mean? A corner 3 guy plus a passer, that's a little tough. The last con that I have here is trying to think of how I could say this without little doughy.
I hear you.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that the 20 pounds he put on was all muscle. I know that we're not into the fat shaming thing here, but little doughy. It
doesn't bode well though.
Right. I wonder
at that age.
Yeah. So just something I'm looking at. I don't know. I didn't get the anthros. I didn't get the physical stuff. We'll see if he passes the body fat test. But like also, I think has a lot of skills to really pop here if you can get him into optimal shape here. So just sort of final verdict on this guy. Not a perfect prospect. Still pretty raw. But he does have the qualities that can't be taught, which is the stuff I typically look for. The feel for the game, his combination of size, effort, all of that is super intriguing. If the Heat do want to be built more like the Oklahoma City Thunder defensively, he fits that archetype of a player, right? Disruptive and versatile on defense, and then even on offense, capable of making plays on offense, putting the ball on the ground for 1 or 2 dribbles, making the right read, making the right pass. In terms of comps, this one was kind of tough. I kind of went everywhere. There's a little big body David Roddy in there for obvious reasons. But like Roddy was a little bit more skilled offensively, not quite as good defensively, but the body type is similar. A little Boris Diaw. Little Thabo Cephalosha. Nick Batum, Najee Marshall.
Batum's a good comp, yeah.
This is kind of where I'm at. Buster Must, 15% fringe, 85% role rotation players, 0% all-stars, 0% all-NBA. I like him. I kind of like him, man. He's interesting. If you draft the next Najee Marshall or Nick Batum at 20, that feels like it's a hit.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and it just feels like that's exactly what his career is going to be. And he'll have some years where he shoots 28% from 3, other years where it's 37% from 3, and you're like, I don't really know, but
yeah, could he be the guy who gets just a lot of seasoning in the G League? Like he just needs a lot of work, especially if he has to get into NBA type shape.
Yeah, I could see him spending a little bit of time in the G League. But again, I think if he were in Miami, he'd be one of those guys where I think Spo would be like, once he gets into shape, he would play him because of what he could do defensively. We've seen him do that before, you know. It's but yeah, I think you'd have to kind of. I don't know if it would be a whole year in the G League, but I could see him spending a little bit of time there.
All right, fair enough.
All right, so of the guys that we talked about here, we're going long on this blue notebook, but who did you Carter Bryant seems like your guy.
I think so. I think kind of in the order in which we talked about him, in terms of what and how I'd rank these players. But maybe I'd do a flip between Sorber and your guy. Sorry, Noah.
Noah Penda.
I think there's potential there. I mean, I like the way you kind of made it seem like if he pops, it would be a big hit, and I think that's worth taking that chance on. But it's also such a risk; you never know exactly what you're going to get.
Yeah, in terms of value, if Collin Murray-Boyles ends up going where most people think he's going to go, which is like lottery-ish area, or you're getting Penda, who Rafael Barlow ranked 41st on his board. ESPN has him at 28. I don't know. Barlow hasn't updated his board in a while, so maybe he could move up here.
Yeah.
Either way, 41, 28 kind of feels like a little bit of a reach. But in terms of value, if we're talking about CMB at 16 or 14, depending on whose board you're looking at, or Penda in like the end of the first round, I kind of like Penda more as a value there. Because that's what, a lot of this is. Sorber, I kind of like. Sorber, I like. I don't like him from necessarily Miami, right? Because they've got Bam and they've got Ware. It's like, well, one of them is going to be playing for, most of the time anyway. I kind of like the idea of having a third big in there, but that's supposed to be Jovic, who I still like in that role. So, I don't know. I can't figure I think you're higher on Carter Bryant than I am. I don't dislike him, but I think you're higher than I am on him.
That's fair.
All right, that'll do it. I think we have one more blue notebook coming next week. Also, stick around here on your Locked On Heat feed. We got a little bit more news coming out of the Kevin Durant camp. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.